Hello, thank you guys so much for clicking this podcast today. I'm in Buenos Aires with Charles Hoskinson. It's a really exciting time for Cardano. We're going to start it off a little light here. How's your morning been so far? What's the morning routine like when you're traveling in another country like
Well,
this?
I'm trying to stay in wolf mode. So you wake up every day at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and you go work out and do 5 kilometers on the treadmill. Try to get that cardio in, and then take a shower, meditate, and ready to go.
It's a lot of work to be in wolf mode, and I haven't really done 5 kilometers in the morning in quite a while, but with that, you've actually started reaching out to other big parts of the industry and kind of fixing ties or making new ties. Can you kind of tell me more about that? Like what is the partnership or person that you've reached out to that you had the most exciting conversation with recently?
I'd say most recently David Schwartz and also Brad Garlinghouse from the XRP community. We've had our differences in the past. You might have noticed that from time to time. But we just said, this is stupid. Let's bury this hatchet. And we had a very productive, good conversation about our role, XRP's role, where the ecosystem is going, and potential collaboration points that we could work together on. In particular, it'd be very interesting to see if we can include XRP in Midnight's story, and there's some Cardano-related technology that could benefit XRP tremendously, like Marlowe, for example, which never really got the right product-market fit with the Cardano ecosystem, but for a fixed-function ledger like Ripple for XRP, it makes a lot of sense to pursue something like that. So there were some technical discussions and some business discussions, and we also wish them well on RLUSD. That's a major win for the XRP ecosystem.
Yeah.
Circle and Tether, they kind of have a cartel, and together they control like 71% of all the economic activity on Ethereum, and the people that they bless do very well, and the people that they exclude harshly. And that's what happens when an oligarchy forms. And so it's really important that new stable coins that are in that have a lot of traction and momentum behind them, you kind of support that so it prevents one actor from gaining too much influence over the market, and the market can stay competitive. So I really want RLUSD not only to succeed on XRP, but I'd like to see it become a multi-chain asset, go across the entire ecosystem, and it'd be a lot of fun to see if we can bring it to Cardano. So that was another part of the discussions.
Yeah, I agree completely. Seeing kind of the hold that Tether has on the industry and USDC as well, we need kind of more competition there ultimately. And, did you almost have kind of an epiphany about where the industry's going? I felt that, kind of whoever was elected was going to determine crypto policy in the US, and, that would kind of trend to other parts of the world. You kind of mentioned this wolf mode. You started reaching out to the other people. Do you think that right now is kind of an important time for our industry to come together to work with politicians to build proper regulation for our industry?
Yeah, and it's a challenging question because there's like 3 things that have to be done in a relatively short period of time. First, the car was heading in the wrong direction. There was regulation through enforcement. There was a really brutal crackdown through Operation Choke Point 2.0 where people are being unbanked. And there's just a general malaise and anger that needs to be cleared, because even if you have a new regime come in, there is still litigation against Coinbase and Kraken and all these other great companies that were unfairly persecuted by Gensler. So the reign of Scary Gary has to come to an end, and that's going to succeed him beyond January 20th. It's going to take some time to cleanse that. Second, there has to be actually a strategy, a U.S. strategy of what is the role of the United States in the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. And that's an all-of-government thing. It's not just let's appoint a crypto czar and then suddenly, magically, we have a strategy and everything's going to be okay. The executive branch is co-equal to the legislative branch. And the reality is that if we expect crypto policy to be permanent and enduring, a law has to be passed. So as much as Trump wants to directly do things through the fiat of an executive order, he's going to have to work closely with the Senate and the House, and we have to figure out how to get a bill passed. So what I've been trying to do is just be a connector in chief. We're setting up a policy office at I/O, and we're going to start talking pretty aggressively across the entire industry with all the different leaders. And we've already reached out to Lehman Baird from Hashgraph. We've reached out to people like John Woods and Algorand. We talk on a pretty regular basis now with people on the XRP side. And there's dozens and dozens of others to reach out to. The Multiverse X guys are next on the list. And what we're just trying to do is establish a baseline of the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's happened over the last 3 years. And then the hope is to go and talk to my friend Senator Scott and a few other people who are in positions of power in Washington, who are going to ultimately be responsible for drafting and passing a crypto law, and basically inform them of what's happened in the industry and what we need to change and solve. And there's obvious stuff like asset classification. Is it a security or a commodity? But there's much more deeper and mercurial things like how do you regulate asset-backed stablecoins, for example, where there could be a lot of influence from a certain cartel inside our industry to push policy in a way that is anti-competitive. So it's an optimistic time, but there's a cautious optimism because while we now have a pro-crypto regime, it may not be pro-crypto for everyone.
Yeah.
It could be pro-crypto for a certain investment portfolio and certain ecosystems, but not for the rest of the industry. So that's the second big challenge, is that we have to overcome the temptation to have easy wins, despite the fact that it could create structural harm. And the third challenge is international harmonization. The US has recused itself from crypto for a while, so we've fallen behind on the international regulatory front. And so Europe's moved ahead, the Middle East has moved ahead, Asia's moved ahead, and we can't ignore these jurisdictions because crypto's global. And so if you have a cryptocurrency, it's going to have users like Cardano, for example. We saw that at this constitutional convention, 100 plus countries. You know, and so, great if the US is pro-crypto, but what if the rest of the world is incompatible with that view? So that's a problem. So international harmonization is another big component. So it really does take an all-of-government approach where Commerce Department and the State Department, the executive branch, and the administrative arm, as well as the Senate, Congress, have to be completely unified in a one-voice policy.
It honestly seems hopeful for me.
It is.
You know,
Very
just
hopeful.
right before the summer, you know, I felt like, you know, I went from at least half glass full all the time to a bit negative there for a minute. And it was because you had people like Michael Saylor, you know, talking about how it's going to be all Bitcoin. You know, there was going to be no Ethereum ETF, you know, there was going to be, you know, it was going to be all Bitcoin. And it's like, you know, I definitely see the industry kind of heading into that direction of DeFi for Bitcoin, but it seemed like, you know, from a regulatory lens, it was going to be all Bitcoin. And that scared me. And, you know, seeing the ETH ETF approval, you know, while in the long term with decentralization, ETFs make me a bit nervous, you know, it kind of it signaled to me that there is still hope. And that, you know, at least in the Western world, that, you know, we can drive innovation. You know, I'm curious, what do you think of that? You know, not to get too off topic, but, you know, ADA and ETFs, right? Of course, you know, people that like price are going to be excited about that in the short term. But, you know, could we do, you know, enterprise wallets one day for ETFs where, you know, people can't vote?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. And, you know, there does need to be a custodial wallet solution. And we thought about this years ago in Berlin in 2019. We talked about adding to the formal specs of Cardano this concept of an enterprise address that holds the asset, but it can't vote or participate in staking. And it made sense for exchanges. It made sense for custodians, for ETFs, you know, things where they're not the primary owner of the asset. They're just holding it on behalf of somebody else. And it's an instrument in that respect. And it's definitely possible to do. And we're certainly going to explore that because there's internal consumption that we need within the Cardano ecosystem for this. And I don't think it's going to be a very complicated add to the ledger rules. There's just going to be some clever hack that they can put together for it.
Yeah.
But more broadly, you know, we are in index products already, like Coinbase has their top 50, and there's several other indexes floating around from Grayscale, I think Bitwise, and all of these do include some percentage of ADA. So an ETF for ADA is inevitable. It's just, you have to reach a certain level and scale. And first, Paul Atkins needs some time at the SEC to kind of clean up the mess that Gensler has left. It's kind of like that movie which had Christian Haydenson in it, you know, I think it was Awake or something, where he has the surgery awareness. And anyway, the surgeon who's operating on him tries to kill him, and they manage to stop that. So another surgeon comes, and he's getting a heart transplant. And he's like, oh my God, this guy's going to die. So, Atkins is in a really bad position. He has to come in, and it's not like he's starting from zero. The patient's on the table, the chest is open, the heart hasn't been working for a while, the blood hasn't been flowing for a while, there's mass attrition, morale is extremely low. The SEC has gone from a neutral regulator to one of the most hated regulators in the entire world. Don't underestimate how horrible that is, because remember, you need talent to do stuff, and you need trust and integrity to do stuff. Nobody in our industry right now wants to talk to the SEC. They literally feel that they're a mortal enemy that has been dishonest and duplicitous and gaslit us for 3 years. So that's going to be a big component of the ETF conversation, because they're a regulatory partner in that respect. They have to work with the industry to figure these things out. So I think there's going to be a latency during 2025 as they reorient, restaff, they get rid of these Gensler acolytes, and potentially there might even be investigations that are done, that have to be done to show the duplicity. And after we've gotten past that, I do believe business as usual will resume itself, and these products will become much more plentiful. So it gives us a little bit of time as an ecosystem to decide on our strategy for that.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me, and that's all I've wanted for the past couple of years, is just some clarity about how we can operate and so we can innovate. When it comes to, you mentioned before we actually started recording here that you're hoping to, speak in front of the Senate one day, just as you did, before the Congress.
Yeah. When I was talking to Senator Scott, he did mention that he wants to do two things: one, hold hearings on cryptocurrencies in particular, and two, create a subcommission with Senator Lummis as the head of it to represent the cryptocurrency sector. So there'll be a hearing at some point, and we just have to figure out when and how to do that. And I think the czar will be a member of it, and I will, and probably a few others. And that's going to be fun, because I think I'd get questioned by Elizabeth Warren. So that's going to be a unique and treasured experience.
Yeah, it's pretty ironic
for our industry. But it's one of those rites of passage. We as an industry have to do that. The Senate is a co-equal branch, and while they care about our industry and they do want to regulate it, they're going to need a little bit of help. And actually, it didn't really help the political situation by taking a czar and merging it with AI. AI and crypto are important technologies, but they're different. They have different winners and losers. They have different actors in charge, and ultimately different economics. And for them to be merged together is a bit confusing to me. And it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to create a consolidated crypto strategy. But it is what it is. And whoever it is and however it works, it's a process, and you work within that process, and you bring a lot of people to bear, and I do believe that we will make great progress next year.
Yeah, so David Sachs was just announced as the crypto czar. Have you had any experience with him in the past? I really don't know the name too well, and I'm curious, if you have any context.
It was a very unusual pick, and I think Elon Musk picked David because Musk and David and Peter Thiel and David have a very good relationship. They've worked together in the past, and this seems to be more AI biased than it does crypto biased, and Musk clearly has an agenda in the AI world, and I think he wants to make sure he gets fair and adequate representation. David has touched our industry as an investor. He's invested in numerous Bitcoin startups, and he has a strong relationship with Multicoin, which holds about $1 billion worth of Solana, give or take, perhaps more these days. That's Kyle Samani and Vinny Langham's venture. So he's obviously familiar with our industry. He's got some tweets here and there about various projects, but he's not a big figure like a Armstrong or a Jesse Powell or something like that, where eat, sleep, and breathe, and every waking moment is crypto and let's do crypto stuff. Rather, he's what you would expect from a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He has a broad spectrum of investments he's made in various different verticals and sectors, whether it be social media. I believe he built something he sold to Microsoft there, or AI, or his time at PayPal. So he's been around for a long time. He's had a lot of winners. He's made a lot of money, and being in that environment and culture, you're going to get pitched on crypto. So at some point, like 5 or 10% of your assets end up in the cryptocurrency space, and they have an outsized influence because they grew exponentially. So obviously they're aware of it. But I wouldn't say he's like a crypto bro or a deep technologist in crypto. And I think the pick was more biased towards the goals of the administration for the AI side than the crypto side. So what is unclear to me is how he wants to lead in that role. Was he going to create an advisory group or a commission, these types of things? When we talked to Cory Gardner and John Carlo and these other people, there was a desire to make this a very collaborative enterprise and bring the entire industry together and have a lot of people come in. I don't believe David was considered for a very long period of time. He did an interview 2 months ago or something like that, and he's a big supporter of Trump, but this was an unexpected pick that came kind of last minute. So I don't really know, and I've never met him personally, so I don't know what his goals are, how he wants to lead. But as I said, it's the executive branch is co-equal to the legislative, and what's going to happen now is the czar is going to have to meet with senators and congressmen and basically coordinate strategy. So that's how I think more inclusion will come in the industry, because the legislative branch already is engaged pretty extensively with almost all the major projects. They passed in the House, for example, FIT 21. So there are definitely networks and paths to be able to make sure that everybody gets a seat at the table and has a proper say on where things need to go.
Yeah, I think our industry is maturing, and change is what we've needed, so I'm excited to see it. We're in Buenos Aires for Cardano's Constitutional Convention, and yesterday it was pretty amazing to see. Over 95% of the delegated representatives that came from all over the world voted yes to ratify the Constitution on chain. Can you kind of tell us kind of the history of that? Maybe someone's just tuning back in to learn more about Cardano.
Voting for Project Catalyst Fund 13 is now open. Please consider supporting Atrium in its efforts to bring millions of users to Cardano. Simply search for Atrium in the Catalyst app. Follow the links below to join the testnet now and learn how to receive the Atma airdrop.
So the last milestone of Cardano has always been decentralized governance and having the community as a whole rise up and lead the entire ecosystem, which is both a terrifying and incredible opportunity. It's terrifying because there's so much uncertainty and unknown elements of it, and decentralization is an extremely difficult thing in practice. And it's a great opportunity because you get a swarm intelligence that no one else has. You stop making as many mistakes, and you don't have a bias, because you get the will of the community as a whole, and those averages, that wisdom of the crowds, can be quite beneficial for your product roadmap, marketing, brand, and growth. So about 2 years ago, a process began where workshops were held all around the world in 50 countries. And those workshops collectively brought the will of the community towards building an on-chain government. So the first step in that was SIP 1694, which was named after the birthday of Voltaire, and there it created the parameters of how an on-chain government would work. And so it's a tripartite model. We have DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, and the SPOs. There's a balance of power between them and a balance of responsibilities between them, and 7 different governance actions that they can have. And they have dominion over everything from the protocol parameters to how to hard fork to the on-chain treasury, which holds about $2 billion. So it really is like a government. It's very powerful. But the challenge is you have to preserve the integrity of that system, so you need both strong institutions and a constitution. Strong institutions take high complexity discussions like budget and product roadmap and these types of things, which are really difficult to converge in a completely decentralized process, and they filter it down to a yes-no vote that an on-chain government can get to. And so you still get democratic consent, but you get the advantage of having subject matter experts look through the thing and be able to help put some wisdom into it. So it's a good hybridization of those two approaches. But you need to make sure you preserve and protect the integrity of the system, which is why a constitution is important. You say, okay, well, what are the rights of the users? What are the rights of the stake pool operators and the DApp builders and people who hold the underlying asset? These are all very important people, and they need to be taken care of. And so you need tenants, and you need constitutional representation to ensure that those things are fair and balanced. So the point of a constitutional convention was to bring delegates from around the entire world. So in this case, 50 countries, 63 delegates, and 63 voting alternates in the event that delegate couldn't do their services, and get them to one place here in BA. And once here, have them debate and eventually ratify at the convention a constitution. The next step is there's going to be some cleanup after the Constitutional Convention, and then as soon as Chang +1 is forked in, which will probably occur in January, a submission to the blockchain for the D-reps in the Interim Constitutional Committee to vote on the Constitution. So very much like the American process, we had a Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, brought all the delegates together. They ratified a constitution there, they voted on it, and then after they did that, it went to the states to be basically enacted. And it took a little bit of haggling and horse trading, but the states got it over the line, and once the states got it over the line, we have the US government. So analogously, once we get this voted on chain, we'll have a full constitution, and then there's end-to-end legitimacy inside the system. Then my role as an interim constitutional committee member comes to an end. New constitutional committee members are elected, and at that point, actually, interestingly enough, input-output will have no formal governance function in Cardano. We're not going to be a D-rep, not going to be a constitutional committee member. So while we kind of pushed the process along in certain dimensions, we now get to be private citizens and be like everybody else, which is a heck of a lot of fun. And the last thing I'd say that needs to be done is the budget process. We need to get to an annual budget basis, which is going to be the most controversial and difficult thing. But the collaborative model that we've developed here, I think, works really, really well. And that model will be reused for product function, budget function, for marketing, branding, and growth, and other things. So the workshops will continue, and they've been really successful in bringing a lot of diversity into the conversation. It was really a touching thing yesterday, watching delegates in Cameroon and Ghana and Venezuela and Paraguay and all these places in the world that normally really get excluded from the political process to be on equal standing with the delegates from the United States of America and Germany and Japan. That you just never see that, and it brought a lot of pride and it touched a lot of people. So I think we can replicate that process, and it's really going to tease out the best in people. And I think Cardano now has the strongest governance system in the entire cryptocurrency industry. And we're going to be able to leverage that to make some really great decisions about where the product goes, how to spend the on-chain treasury, and then ultimately how do we compete in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it was really exciting to walk in there and pass all of the flags on the way in there from each country, and you run into them, and they introduce themselves to you. And I've just never been around so much culture in the United States, like having everyone fly in. It really has been an amazing experience, and I appreciate you inviting me out here. One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned that you guys weren't going to be a D-rep. Why? And I just saw yesterday CF kind of announce that they're going to be a D-rep. Do you think that, what do you think of that?
I mean, obviously it's their prerogative. They're an independent organization, and they and their board have the prerogative to do what they will with the ADA. It is the community's ADA, I consider it, but by law it's actually theirs, and we can't vote or control or do anything with it. I think it's inappropriate for the core entities that have been around for 10 years to continue to put their feet on the scales and influence and change things. You have to give the community their time and their ability to step up and grow. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to screw some things up. That's the point of guardrails. That's the point of annual budgets. That's the point of institutions. You let them make mistakes, but you don't let them burn the entire house down. So they can screw up, let's say, with the budget. Maybe we lose $100 million or $200 million. There's still $2 billion. So then we'll learn as an ecosystem, and we'll grow as an ecosystem. But I don't feel this paternal urge to say, well, I have to be involved in every conversation and opine on every decision in order for this to be successful. I've had my time in the sun, and it's important that the community as a whole step up and they take that role, because ultimately we'll get a much, much stronger ecosystem if we do that. You can't have a savior. You can't have, well, every time something bad happens, well, Charles is going to step in and save us, or this hero is going to come in and resolve things. You have to abdicate at some point and allow a changing of the guards, and that's what we witnessed here. We witnessed people who spent, in some cases, 2 years of their lives attending dozens of workshops, debating a constitution. I mean, how many people do that? That's a weird thing. Not paid. It was volunteer. Come to South America. Some of the people traveled for 3 days to get here to South America, changing like 6 planes and staying at crappy hotels and so forth. But they came here and they got it done. And they disagreed without being disagreeable. They were tremendously collaborative. They're highly engaged in this process. And that's just the delegates of the Constitutional Convention, not even the D-reps and not even the future Constitutional Committee members. So the time ought not to be being a D-rep and getting involved and creating an outsized influence there. The time ought to be spent in continuing this collaborative process and putting the money and resources into workshops and getting them now involved not just in governance, but also the product roadmap and the marketing and branding and growth, the budget of the ecosystem, the innovation work streams of the ecosystem, and ultimately how do we be competitive. That's where we need to invest time, effort, money, and resources, and that's what I'm going to be doing in 2025. I need to make sure that we keep getting more people to play. We keep getting more people into the conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's things that need to be done in governance, but we need to give SIP 1694 time to be in the sun and discover what went wrong. I mentioned at the Constitutional Convention that the Articles of Confederation were the first governing structure of the United States. They didn't work so well. So they were an input into the constitutional process to rewrite the American Constitution, and that became the Constitution we know and love today. Well, analogously, 1694 is the beginning, but it's not the only thing we're going to do. We need to be able to accurately measure outcomes and look if they're efficient, effective, and preserving integrity, and then start processes that ensure that we can change what we have to something that's superior and better. There's an enormous house of work that needs to be done there, and that's where I'm going to focus the work.
Well, some of that work has been getting done. You know, I read the Constitution probably 3-4 months ago. I went to one of the workshops in Florida, and you know, there are a couple things that stood out to me where I was like, oh, this is, you know, not necessarily something that I would put in there. And then I, you know, came here and I'm sitting there watching, you know, these delegative representatives debate the exact thing that I had an issue with without me even saying anything to them. And they went with the thing that I would have liked to be taken out. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. Like, you know, for people that weren't here, you essentially, you know, you had all of these people in a room and, you know, kind of raising yes or no's, voting things in and out. And the Constitution, it did become better. You know, I watched it before my eyes without me saying a word. You know, this Constitution improve, and it was pretty awesome to see, especially from the language barriers and all of the cultures there. Quantum Hosky. You know, Hosky asked me, he's like, why is Charles thinking, that's a community question, why was Charles thinking about me in the shower?
So Midnight is going to bring all the layer ones that do smart contracts together and Bitcoin to basically give them a privacy layer, private smart contracts and selective disclosure. And that's a super valuable thing for real world assets and for bringing the $20 trillion that are kind of waiting on the sidelines into the cryptocurrency industry. And that's nice because it puts a big spotlight on Cardano. We don't have an analogy for that in the GameFi, metaverse, and meme coin space. And that's a big area of growth. People care a lot about it. So I thought it would be really cool to take a partner chain tech and deploy a metaverse game, kind of like an MMO that looks a little bit like Minecraft, and do what I've always wanted to do and build a completely original experience that no one has ever seen before. So, you know, I studied mathematics, and so I remember studying things like hypergeometries and non-Euclidean geometries, and you start developing an intuition for these things. The general public has no clue what a four-dimensional space looks like and how to visualize that and think about that. They have no clue what non-Euclidean geometry is like. So if you can explain it and you can put mathematical prose, you still would have no clue what it looks like. Or you can show it, and you can show it in a metaverse and bring everybody together. And if it's a creative metaverse, you actually create a beautiful consumptive element for the token, because the crafting actually requires a token, and it's deflationary, and that it burns as people build things. So that was the basis of it. But then I also wanted to do some things I just are unfinished business. Like, I've always wanted to do them in the cryptocurrency space. So in particular, I was very excited about this idea of partnering with people like OpenBCI and Arctop and others, and developing a consensus algorithm where you can mine with your brain. So you put on a headset, it has EEG, and the EEG actually allows you, through a focused attention, to create blocks. So Minotaur is really cool because I can combine Ouroboros consensus, but then I can put this together, and then I can actually create gameplay elements that are based upon how focused you are, and also if you can merge your brainwaves with other people. It's called a brain net. So you can have these people join a metaverse, they're crafting, they're in a four-dimensional world, and they're non-Euclidean geometries, so like the shortest distance is not necessarily a straight line. It's like things are weird, and then suddenly you can have unlockable things if you party with people and you actually meditate together or focus together and your brain waves come together, and then you get rewarded through mining fees. But then I also wanted to add a quantum element to it, randomness to it. So I know all the guys that do quantum random number generators, and they're amazing things, the photonic quantum random number generator. So I thought it would be really, really cool to have a mining process where you inject truly random, through quantum devices, numbers into the game world, and then those quantum numbers basically aggregate up and they entangle with parts of the world and change the state of the world. So they can change the time in the world, so you have time dilation, they change the geometry of the world, they can hit players and then have random effects like drain your wallet or fill your wallet up, just truly chaotic thing. It also creates another demand point for the token because you can protect yourself from these entangling effects if you consume some of the token. So there's some really cool gameplay elements and tokenomics elements that we can put in. And then finally, I really wanted to put an AI component inside the game. And I wanted to do an AI component that no one has ever done before. It's a little creepy, it's a little fun, but I'd love to bring in dish brain computing. So dish brain computing is where they take neurons, either from animals or humans, they grow them in a Petri dish, and there's companies like Coracle Labs and others that do this, and there's even one team that's training a dish brain to play Doom. So you can actually, through dish brain computing, hybridize with large language models, create truly rich and immersive NPCs that are inside the game world. So that's another component that I want to put in. And just like Midnight that's doing this large base airdrop to all these different chains, do a large base airdrop to Hosky and all of these meme coins that exist and these GameFi coins that exist across the industry. So in many ways, we're bringing all of that culture and community into Cardano and into our ecosystem. And because it's a completely original experience that no one has ever seen before, no one's ever touched before, it's just going to blow people away. And they'll just be like, wow, this is amazing. And it's just legitimately cool. It's like you're mining with your mind, you're like merging your consciousness with other people, you're traveling through four-dimensional realities, time works differently in certain cases in the game world, and you're interacting with NPCs that seem lifelike because they're actual human brains in Petri dishes. It's like out there, man. But this is the kind of stuff you can create when you are really focused on adoption and you're actually building products. I've been so long in the guts of core that I haven't really had a chance to truly get involved in my passion, which is building interesting experiences and solving interesting problems. And I think we need to have a consumer-friendly, game-friendly, meme-friendly approach in Cardano. And there's been great work by the SNEC community and these other guys, and they've really pushed hard, but we're just a small glass of water in an ocean that exists across the rest of the industry. And Midnight's going to create a spotlight for us on that enterprise and the smart contract side. We need to create a spotlight for that other side if we actually want to get mainstream adoption.
Yeah, that's very true. It kind of reminds me of, Axie Infinity, but going wolf mode. Yeah. Right? So, that idea of kind of bringing in, all of these other ecosystems, that kind of reminds me of our podcast last year. And it's probably my fault because I made it the title, Midnight Airdrop, but I get questions, DMs every day. When Midnight Airdrop? Do you think we'll see that in 2025?
Oh, yeah. Midnight is getting very mature. We've had hackathon and hackathon. We follow the opposite approach with Midnight because we solved all the hard problems with Cardano. So Midnight doesn't have to worry too much like how do we decentralize and how do we get governance done, because it's just going to borrow from Cardano, and that's the magic of partner chains. And those are super fucking hard problems. And so it's nice not to have to solve those problems, which meant we could just focus on the product quality. So from day one, we said, let's get a great development experience and let's have hackathons and let's have lots of people just start building things. So DC Spark is building things and Globant is building things, and we've had thousands of developers over dozens of hackathons basically build tons of cool stuff. And this has allowed Midnight to evolve a really rich and mature development experience, and it's going to launch with a lot of really cool applications that are cross-chain. But the other thing is, because of partner chains, there's an acceleration and certainty of being able to launch Midnight, get it out the door. So it'll come in 2025. It's hard to pinpoint the exact quarter because there are some things that we have to still lock down. But the nice thing is also Hydra is going to be used in the launch of Midnight, and this allows us to really put our foot on the accelerator for how the distribution is going to work. So we'll make an announcement pretty soon about it, especially after the Midnight Foundation is set up, and we'll work closely with them on how to coordinate that. But in the coming months, there'll be some really substantive announcements, and there's only maybe 1 or 2 major upgrades left for the Midnight testnet. There's going to be an upgrade probably in February that's going to add the public ledger support with the private ledger, and a ton of quality of life improvements that we've learned from the hackathons to improve the dev experience. And then there's probably going to be 1 or 2 more to get it to that mainnet readiness that are left. So we're moving very fast. There's a very nice cadence. It's been a joy working with the Polkadot ecosystem and kind of hybridizing and merging some of our ideas with their ideas. And what's also cool is we get to give back to the Polkadot ecosystem. So a lot of the things that we constructed in Midnight will upstream try to contribute to Parity Substrate if it makes sense. And there are some things that we've done to kind of leapfrog what they have, like the work with Concordium on Concordium BFT, and these other things are very valuable to the ecosystem as a whole.
That's really exciting. Voltaire is here, and at the party the other night, 1 million transactions on Hydra. Thank you so much for doing the podcast today, Charles. It's been really exciting being in Buenos Aires, and I'm excited for Midnight. I'm excited for Chang +1 in 2025. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions, let us know down below, and hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Goodbye.
Bye.